Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, first part thereof for the 4th of May 2025. Let's start with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find those linked in the description to the video below. We have a little bit of an uptick in terms of personnel lost. Good news for the Ukrainians. In fact, right across the categories, there's been an uptick, certainly from yesterday. 11 tanks, that is above the daily average. 24 troop-carrying AFVs, likewise just above the daily average. 52 artillery systems, well over double the daily average. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, that's good. 129 vehicles and fuel tanks, a pretty decent number there. And 2 aircraft. That 2 aircraft is something we're going to dwell on. But before we get there, I would suggest that means there's quite a bit of activity. I know around Pokrovsk it's a bit hairy for the Ukrainians, just to the east of Pokrovsk and Murnerad, where the Russians have actually made some fairly decent advances, although they've been struggling more directly south of Pokrovsk, although I think the Russians are pushing back after Ukraine had made gains there consistently. There's a lot of activity, I think, in Toretsk, around the Terny and Torska area. Just, quite a few places, meaning that the Russians are back to losing quite a few troops and pieces of materiel, but then they will be grinding on in terms of territorial gains, but that's just mere kilometers on a huge front line, but it is, moving in the wrong direction, and Ukraine would like to reverse that. UK intelligence has come out with their own casualty estimates, and like I said, for the last couple of times the UK intelligence has done this, it does seem to align pretty much exactly with what the Ukrainian General Staff say. Okay, so that's worthy of note. I've talked previously about how it's going to be fairly difficult for intelligence services to diverge too much from what the Ukrainians are saying, because most of that data, most of the information is going to be coming from the Ukrainians in one way or the other. They're not walking around the fields with clipboards confirming what is claimed. They are looking at open source intelligence data coming onto the socials. They're looking at what the general staff say. They might have access to satellite imagery, but over and above what the Ukrainians are saying, that there's not going to be hugely impactful, I don't think, compared to what's already there on what they're being told. So I would wonder how they would diverge too much from the general staff anyway. Like, they might have people involved in the general staff. They might have foreign, like the UK might have military personnel involved in that whole setup that would be like, yeah, okay, we think they're broadly on point, or no, but essentially I think it's kind of almost unavoidable that they are going to be relying to a large degree on what the Ukrainians say. So take maybe the UK claims with a pinch of salt. However, like I've been saying over the course of the war, the Ukrainians, I think, were much more justified in believing what the Ukrainians say, certainly in comparison to what the Russians say. Now, Russia suffered 160,000 casualties in just 4 months of 2025, they say, putting this year on track to be the deadliest of the Ukraine war so far. So, of course, casualties include dead, wounded, deserters and POWs, but 160,000 in 4 months, 40,000 a month. That is at the top end of their recruitment numbers, the Russians. And so that would suggest that their recruitment numbers would be 1 for 1. They wouldn't be swelling the ranks, they'll just be replacing. It depends how many of those wounded personnel get thrown back in within a month, right? That's your key. Despite these staggering losses, territorial gains remain minimal, says the Euromaidan press. But yeah, there's a graph here to give you an indication of these stats. What do we have? We have 2025 at the moment is sitting above the 3 previous years in terms of personnel losses. Now 2024, it ended up skyrocketing from the next month onwards, and the question is going to be whether it continues that way, because actually it dropped significantly in January to February, So February time, a fairly sizable drop there, but still well above what we saw last year. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens next month and onwards, and whether actually the numbers would sit below where 2024 ended up going to. Okay, we're going to move on to those two aircraft that are now being claimed to have been shot down. So just to remind you, there was the footage that we saw of a Magura, largely claimed to be a Magura V5 Sea Baby firing an R-73 air-to-air missile from the surface, taking down that Su-30SM naval fighter bomber, $50 million worth of it. So that's the onboard footage. It came from the Ukrainian intelligence service. Then there were claims that actually it's a V7 drone. It's an upgraded one, armed not with those R-73 but AIM-9 missiles. These are these Sidewinder missiles that could well have been used to shoot down that Su-30SM near Novorossiysk, where the Ukrainians have pushed the Russian Black Sea fleet back to. Now, the Magura V5 is a new, enlarged, and upgraded version of the V7 is an upgraded version of the V5, extending its length to 8 meters compared to 5.5 meters of the V5. So considerably longer, and potentially with more quality firepower there. I presume the AIM-9 are better than the R-73. I'm not sure, 100% no. What you would assume is that being an upgrade that it would be. You can go and check out an article from Naval News on the Magura V7. Okay, so then the claim was that there was one shot down, and that was caught on that imagery. Then Zelensky came out last night and said Ukraine has actually destroyed 2 Russian aircraft in 24 hours, revealing the details of unique operations. One was hit by a Magura V5 or V7 drone in occupied Crimea. The second during a strike on military facilities, said Zelensky. Brilliant work, he said. And then we had Budanov come out and actually say something slightly different from Zelensky. Budanov confirmed the crew of the first Su-30 survived and was rescued by a civilian vessel that we saw from fighter bomber statements yesterday. Fighter bomber is a Russian telegram channel from possibly a serving pilot. So they claim that a civilian cargo vessel managed to save those crew members, and that the civilian vessel was not targeted by those existing drones in the water, which goes to show that the Ukrainians aren't prepared to take out civilian vessels. And then as for the second plane, he said preliminary reports indicate its crew did not survive. So the first crew died, the first crew were saved, the second crew did not survive. But he talks about that second one being taken down by a Magura drone as well. Ukrainian sea drones down 2 Russian Su-30 jets near Novorossiysk. Initially, reports confirmed the destruction of only 1 jet, but Ukraine's military intelligence agency chief, Kirill Budanov, later clarified that 2 aircraft were hit. So it wasn't what Zelensky said about having a military facility being hit that took out that other, one would presume, parked up Su-30, but actually there were 2 Su-30s that were taken out in the air by these drones. Really significant haul then yesterday, and a very successful attack from those drones. I don't know what happened to those drones, because those drones, there were different claims. Possibly there were 3 drones going out on that mission, sea drones together. Whether they were destroyed afterwards, or whether they could return, whether they had enough juice to return all the way back to, I presume, Odessa area. I don't know. I presume that they were probably taken out, but who knows? But really great to see 2 airplanes taken down, and those are here on the general staff figures. 2 aircraft lost, as you can see. Then we hear the GUR units. So again, they seem to be fairly active, the military intelligence units. Primari struck a P-18 radar command post. Radar itself, its power generator, and a Zu-23-2 anti-aircraft gun likely covering the site were taken out in occupied Crimea. So again, really high value targets being taken out in Crimea. And this is a decent bit of kit, the P-18 radar. Let's go and see what the cost of that might be. P-18 radar cost. And we'll see what Copilot has to say. As you can see, it's it's a fairly large bit of kit. Isn't readily available. Yeah, I thought we looked this up the other week. Yeah, but it's going to be, I guess, pretty expensive. That's a sizable bit of kit, as I've mentioned. Oh, someone says 3.6 million. But yeah, don't know. And it depends on upgrades as well to these things. So that's a good strike for them. And again, shows the success, I think, of these UAVs, these aerial drones that are released from the USVs, these sea drones or surface drones that travel close to the Crimean coast, and then the UAVs take off, and then you've got another 15 kilometers, I would have thought, or maybe even 20 kilometers inland from the coast that they can strike, causing havoc, it seems. Now, we have a destruction of a Russian T-90M, so that's basically the best tank they have, and T-62M tanks with troops by the Birds of Magyar. So these are Robert Magyar's very adept pilots and teams taking out, as we can see, at least one really decent tank. Haven't seen too many T-90Ms be taken out as of late. You wonder how many they have left. What else? Magyar, again, unmanned technologies dominate. This summer, the kill zone will stretch for 15 to 20 kilometers. Here's the key part: in both directions. So we're not talking about 7 kilometers each side of the contact line will be a kill zone. He's saying 15 to 20 kilometers in both directions. You're going to have a 30 to 40 kilometer corridor where humans are going to struggle to move, struggle to even exist. We've already heard from Russian anecdotes that they don't come out till nighttime from dugouts, and they are just desperately afraid. I just saw a fiber optic drone, a Ukrainian one actually, go through some forest, and I probably should have showed you this one, go through a forest and then go evade all of the kind of netting and I think there was like a tripwire thing or something, go up to the edge of the dugout, go around the corner, down and through the door and explode. And I think you can see someone there as well. In other words, A, the pilots are very good. B, obviously fiber optics are meaning they are resistant to electronic warfare. And C, it's just like, who would want to be a soldier anywhere around where, I mean, you'd think you'd be safe in a forest, but no. And that dugout was blown up. You are getting to a stage where I think the Ukrainians are really working hard on replacing humans with drones and making it so that the Russians really can't move, that logistics is increasingly difficult, that actually just generally getting to the front line, getting to the contact line becomes a challenge in and of itself, let alone making gains. That said, of course, they are still making gains in a number of places on the front line, but at what cost? At what cost? So Magyar's drones, and please check out my live stream yesterday where James from Wine Ukraine came on and talked about a number of things. His knowledge of drones that he's working on, alternative systems for Starlink, giving you hints about that. But I was also talking about and I did this yesterday in the, or was it the day before? Talking about the Brave One system and the points system that these units have. And Magyar's birds are number one in the point system. And it means that the most successful units get the most points and then get more kit. So because you want to give the best kit to the best people, right? And that virtuous cycle is really having an effect. And they have this point system for these units, and points win prizes, and your prizes is equipment. So, but they can also tinker with the points to strategize across the battlefield. So you can say, right, we really need to work on taking out personnel rather than equipment at the moment, for example. I'm just making this up. But actually, this did happen. They said, we're going to change the points, 2 points per person killed to 6 points per person killed. So it's gamifying the front line. You can say that's horrible and this and that, but functionally, it's working, and it's having an effect on incentivizing the Ukrainian troops to do a better job of attriting X, Y, and Z. And when they tripled the point value of the personnel, they tripled the deaths of personnel. It had a tangible effect on the Ukrainian drone crews doing a smarter job on taking out individual soldiers. Incredible stuff. And that's that brave one. So then they go on to like an eBay type, Amazon type website, if you like, and they procure more equipment from that using the points that they've accrued as individual units. It's quite incredible. You get like 40 points, I think, for a damaged tank, is it? Or is it 20 points for a damaged tank and then 40 points for a destroyed? Anyway, 43 points gets you a vampire drone. So you can sort of work out what's going on. I think you get 60 points for a rocket system. Maybe that would be like a BM-21 Grad or something like that. And then, that generates an incentive, and it also breeds success. Okay, moving on to distant strikes. We've got 165 drones, again, Shahed drones sent into Ukrainian airspace. Really significant numbers of drones, back up to those high numbers. Not quite to the 200 we did see on occasion, but still really significant numbers. 69 were taken out by conventional means, 80 suppressed by electronic warfare. That's 149. That leaves 16 drones. That's around 10%. That's slightly better than we've seen. It's not, of course, the 5 to 0%, but 10% getting through is certainly better than some days we've had 30% getting through. So slightly better, but a pretty horrific night for Ukraine last night nonetheless. Of course, what goes up must come down. So of all of those that went up, they all come down. So that's 165 explosions, and that's 165 potential, damages being done on the ground there. So Zelensky has said Russia begs for silence on May the 9th, so the victory parade, while bombing Ukraine daily. That's peak cynicism. Last night, 165 drones, mostly Shaheds, hit Kyiv, Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, and Cherkasy. Homes and a dorm burned. Children were among the injured. Over 1,180 drones, 1,360 bombs, and 10 missiles hit Ukraine this week. And so he was sort of ranting about that. Well, not ranting seems a bit pejorative, like just clearly, justifiably angry with what took place last night as the day sort of progress, as the night progressed. Some really challenging images of lots of burning stuff. Tim White saying an explosion also heard by most of Kyiv a few minutes ago. This was last night, he's reporting this, and there's just been another blast in Ukraine's capital. Earlier, Mayor Klitschko said air defense was working, and you can go and listen to these explosions and whatnot on his threads. Fire in the courtyard of an apartment block in the Nivki district of Kyiv after a big explosion. Debris reportedly causing damage in the Obolon area. Frightening update from Kyiv. Several floors in an apartment building are on fire in the capital. Photos from the developing fire in Kyiv. Images are still subject to reporting restrictions due to martial law. Kyiv burning tonight after another Russian drone attack. A strong fire following the attack. There's around 40 other drones in Ukrainian airspace right now, he said last night, about 12 hours ago. Kyiv update. In the Svatoshnisky district, 3 residential buildings have been hit by fire, said to be from falling debris. Again, successful interception of those. So you go back to the stats and you say, oh, well done, we've taken 69 of them out with air defense and 80 with electronic warfare. Yeah, but they come down and cause this kind of destruction. In Obolon, several cars are on fire. Moment a high-rise building was hit during the drone attack. In Obolon, the popular Dream Town shopping centre has suffered some damage. We'll see that in a second. Footage from Dream Town shopping centre in Obolon district, one of 3 districts with some damage tonight. Air raid alert has now been switched off as the skies finally cleared. Before he closed about 7 hours ago, he does a roundup of the details Luckily, I mean, it's incredible that with all of this destruction, I find it amazing that there are fewer deaths than you might expect. Still 7 seeking medical attention, including 2 children, he says, from Kyiv. First footage of the damaged Dreamtown shopping mall in Kyiv, and of course this affects commercial incomes, this affects tax incomes, this affects the economy, as well as, of course, the Ukraine is paying a tough price psychologically, and of course in terms of health, deaths and injuries. But even when it's just on a commercial centre like this, that's going to have a huge effect. I mean, look at the destruction here. At night, Russian forces struck residential areas in Kyiv and Cherkasy. In Kyiv, 11 people are injured, including 2 children, and a shopping mall was hit. Here's some more imagery from the shopping mall. Fires and damage to, as mentioned, 3 districts there. Russian tactics of attacking civilians. Of course, it might be them attacking civilians. It could be air defences bringing these drones down in civilian areas. But of course, if you're going to send 165 drones essentially over things like the capital and the second biggest city, then you know this is going to happen. This is, at best for the Russians, deeply, deeply irresponsible and immoral. I can't even call them, Russians, bastards, because that's not enough for them, says this one woman. More than 20 cars, 24 buildings were damaged in a drone attack on Kyiv's Obolon district last night. In addition to residential buildings, 2 kindergartens, a shopping mall and a supermarket were damaged. Again, it affects communities, it affects the economy. It's just horrible, horrible stuff. And this is happening every single night. She says, they're terrorists, and that's an understatement. You're just giving terror to these people. It's night. People are sleeping, resting, tired from work. When we went out in the corridor, windows started flying out from the explosion. We went downstairs. We saw these cars were burning, and that was our car. It's smashed. A lot of destruction. Glass was falling from the windows. People were terrified, she said. This other woman. Yeah, just it's, heartbreaking stuff, isn't it? But it happens every night. Every single night, the Russians just are relentless in their desire for, scare quotes, liberation of Ukraine. But of course, liberation for them is defined as just outright destruction and death. That's what they really want. Horrible stuff. So Russian air defense reportedly shot down 2 Ukrainian drones around 9:15 last night over Belgorod and Murmansk region. There was some real whinging from some Russians on Tinternet last night that what the hell is going on, that Ukrainian drones can make it to Murmansk. Of course, this is not for the first time. They've routinely got to Murmansk. So Murmansk is where there's the Olenia air base. It's right up near the Finnish border. So we're talking like the northernmost area. If you went directly north from Ukraine, you basically get to the sort of Arctic area past Moscow and up to the Finnish border. And near the Finnish border is the Olenia air base. And this is like, I forget how many thousands of kilometers from Ukraine. This is 1,500. I forget now, but it's very far from Ukraine's border. And the Russians are rightly saying, what the hell are drones doing getting to Murmansk? Earlier, 3 more drones were reportedly downed over Murmansk. Olenia Air Base, hosting Russian strategic bombers, is based in Murmansk region. Of course, don't know. Oh, there you go, 2,500 kilometers from Kyiv there. So that gives you an idea of how far. I mean, really. So you got Russia down. You got Moscow down around here, right? And you think, well, that's pretty far. My goodness, you're going a long way to get up to the Olenia naval air base up there. Incredible feats of drone flying there. Now, a lot of people sort of posting images and videos of this fire in the Strela transformer plant in Bryansk's Suzemka is burning, confirmed by local residents and a regional governor. Strela specializes in producing transformers, auto-transformers and reactors, serving key sectors such as defense and aerospace. The plant has already been targeted in both 2024 and 2023, so not for the first time, but this looks pretty significant. The Russian Telegram channels report a fire at the Strela plant in Bryansk. Radar equipment, transformers, throttles, coils, filters, etc. It works with Russian Rostec. That's the defense, the state defense concern. completes orders for the Russian military industrial complex. So lots of pretty significant, lots of evidence of destruction there and fires. Looks like multiple fires, actually. So that's good news for Ukraine as they strike, useful military targets there, not just throwing their drones into the middle of the capital city. Speaking of which, though, and I have talked to you about how everyone's sweating it with regard to, Russians and foreign dignitaries, like apparently Robert Fico is now going to, he was supposed to be ill. Vucic has pulled out from Serbia of the May the 9th Victory Day parade. There's a rumor that Putin might actually be watching it by video feed, but we hear that Xi Jinping is going to come. Robert Fico is going to go and saying, Ukraine shouldn't be threatening X, Y, and Z. And Zelensky said, we can't promise anything will be safe at the Victory Day parade. My theory the other day was that what I would do is that you say you're going to strike it, give everyone the heebie-jeebies, and then they pull loads of air defenses from there, and then you strike where they pulled the air defenses from, or you just basically just cause maximum panic for the Russians. So the Victory Day parade ends up being a bit of a damp squib, or a bit of a, it's over monitored and becomes more of a burden for the Russians than some kind of celebration. And actually that seems to be what Ukraine's doing. So you've had posts from people right across the government suggesting there's going to be all sorts of hell to pay by the Russians on Victory Day parade. Head of Ukraine's presidential office has reposted an image of the Kremlin in flames with the caption, "We brought this day as close as we could." Andrei Yermak added, "Beautifully drawn." So you've got, the Kremlin there, an old pixelated 80s kind of style picture of Zelensky overlooking the Kremlin burning with all these drones in the air. You've got an explosion behind the Kremlin. A picture of the Kremlin was just published by People's Deputy Mariana Bezugla. So lots of people right through the government are producing these memes that are suggesting there's going to be all sorts going on the Victory Day parade, that Ukraine's absolutely going to hammer the crap out of the Kremlin, the Red Square, etc., etc. I doubt that's going to happen, but this is exactly what you'd want, which is the psyops going on beforehand to put the Russians into panic mode. Now, Putin himself, as we move on to other bits and pieces, has said that Russia was forced to support Crimea, calling it the right decision. So the beginning of the war, maybe 2014. Despite sanctions, he says Russia made strong progress. He admits Russia wasn't prepared. And this is an interesting omission, because this is exactly what I've said was the case. So they never intended this to be a war. It really was a special military operation to begin with. They were going to depose the Zelensky government and clear, within 3 days, and then clear up the rest of the country with their Rosgvardia. And that explains the kind of the not warlike strategizing in their movement into Ukraine, and then it all went wrong because they weren't expecting there to be any pushback, and then it had to become a war, and then they had not planned for a war, and Ukraine was actually able in that first year to do some pretty decent repelling of the Russian forces, and they receded to broadly where the front lines are now. You had the lightning counteroffensive up in the Kyiv direction, then you had Kherson, so on and so forth, and that's where we are. So Putin said he admits Russia wasn't prepared for the special military operation, hoping for a peaceful resolution in Donbass, but claiming the other side acted differently. Well, it turns out the other side didn't want us invading into their country, and they acted differently to what we thought, by defending their country. But I think that's a really interesting omission. Now, he quotes, "They wanted to provoke us, to make us slip. There was no need to use nuclear weapons, and I hope there won't be. We have enough forces to bring what we started in 2022 to a logical conclusion with the result Russia needs." So he's broadly saying several things here, that it's unlikely that nuclear weapons are going to be needed, and we've got enough troops to bring this to the conclusion that we want. Now, of course, that's vague enough to keep you thinking as to what really are the intentions of the Russians. What would Putin be happy with if he pulled out of Ukraine, or pulled out from continuing further kind of moves into Ukraine? What's his maximalist agenda? What's his minimalist agenda? It's going to be somewhere in between. But what's the absolute minimum he would leave with his head still, at least a perception being that his head would still be held high? Now, as mentioned, Xi Jinping will visit Moscow on May the 7th to May the 9th. He'll attend a parade, according to Russian media. Despite being recently discharged from the hospital and advised the doctors to rest, Serbian President Vučić hasn't cancelled plans to attend the May the 9th events. So, the claim was he was too ill to attend. He might well be attending now then, Vučić. Slovak Prime Minister Fico has also confirmed his attendance. So a bit of a reversal. Definitely for Fico, don't know about Vučić. And it looks like Xi Jinping is going to be there. So, yeah, Fico said he will attend the May the 9th parade despite recent health rumours. So, again, both of them claiming health issues. Fico also called Zelensky's statement that Ukraine cannot ensure the safety of politicians at celebrations in Moscow a threat. There's a real big tete-a-tete at the moment between Hungary and Ukraine. There's a lot of rhetoric going on between the Hungarians and the Ukrainians at the political level. There's also, as you can see, a bit of an issue between Fico and Ukraine too. That's been bubbling for some time now. Talking about the Victory Day celebrations and parades, Russia has held a children's Victory Day parade. Kids are systematically being indoctrinated with the special military operation propaganda, and here we can see them do their thing. These are all children, and it's a little bit sickening as far as I can.
На марше расчет сводных общеобразовательных учреждений Кировского муниципального района. Возглавляет парадный расчет лейтенант Имакаев Сулейман Хампашаевич. Участник специальной военной операции, награжден орденом мужества, медалью Суворова, медалью...
Yeah, don't like that. Don't like that at all. It's all horrible. And to continue the same kind of brainwashed affair in Washington, the Immortal Regiment march took place, the first time in 6 years. Russian media called it a march through the American capital. It hasn't taken place for 6 years, and they've allowed it to take place this year. It's really distasteful. One of the central themes, the proxy conflict in Ukraine, which participants predictably do not view as a war of Russia against Ukraine. Make no mistake, says Anton Gerashenko, Putin is the president and leader of these people. I don't believe their goal is the great USA. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. And when you look at what flags are being flown by Russians here, as Soviet flags, this is, therefore, communism. And it just goes to show, how many people in the United States, there are these, obviously, MAGA Americans who are siding more with Russia than Ukraine. And then you've got these information ecosystems that allow this kind of sentiment to prevail. Of course, if you're Russian, you're more likely to support the Russian narrative. But you could also be a liberal in exile, or an anti-authoritarian, an anti-dictator in exile. But no, these people seem to be, trying to say, they've got American flags as well as like Soviet flags. It's a complete ideological mess as far as I can work out. But I find that really distasteful. Kim Jong-un has stated that the North Koreans are carrying out a mass rearmament by producing new equipment. Some of the old equipment was sold to Russia. That is what the claim is. And we know that we're seeing these Koksan 1989 self-propelled guns and multiple launch rocket systems find their way to the front line, particularly in the north, in Kursk Oblast, but we have seen some of them elsewhere as well. This is worrying stuff that the North Koreans are able to give all this kit to Ukraine or sell it, to Russia or sell it or whatever, and there's little comeback from the West. Rare earth deals, says CNN, will allow Ukraine to buy weapons from the US. So we've now seen, potential foreign military sales be allowed, and it appears that there was an amount of blackmail going on from the Americans. We won't sell you stuff. We will not sell you stuff until a rare earth minerals deal is done. So if the US provides Ukraine with new military aid, quote, the US partner's capital contribution to the fund will be considered increased by the amount of the estimated cost of such military aid. So this is what I was trying to explain yesterday. If there's, say, $15 billion of aid that they're going to, scare quotes, give to Ukraine, it's not giving it to Ukraine. They'll essentially be selling it to Ukraine. There is no gifting. There is no military aid in the sense that there's military sales. Because even the aid gets valued at, say, 15 billion, and that is their contribution to the investment into the minerals deal. And then, of course, Ukraine would have to match that with $15 billion. In other words, they are paying for that aid. And what I was wondering yesterday is if they have to meet that $15 billion investment, military aid, with $15 billion of their own investment, but do they also have to compensate another 15, is that just it? But then, how does that work in terms of the deal? So that will be 50% of the deal, but the only investment will be $15 billion because the US investment is in military equipment. So there's some clarity I'd like in terms of how that all works. But anyway, I'm sure that'll all come out in the wash. That's enough from me. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate your support. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Oh, and please remember the Car for Ukraine campaign that we are still involved in, and we are trying to push ever higher up to 15,500. That's really amazing. Trying to get to 22,000. I don't know if we've bitten off more than we can chew, but if you can help out, of course, that'd be hugely appreciated. The link is found you can go to atpgeo.com/donate, and that should take you to this page. Thank you very much to the two people who yesterday contributed, but I don't know their names. They didn't put them on a donor wall, so they're anonymous. Thank you very much, though. Really appreciate that. Okay, take care. Speak soon. Toodle pips.